Good morning, everybody. How are you doing? I'm going to make sure that we are live on ROKFIN as well. So if you're on ROKFIN, definitely let me know that you can see this okay, because it is not giving me... Oh, that's right. I scheduled to start at 8:10. Okay, so never mind. So ROKFIN will be live at 8:10, so I'm going to just string this out just a few more minutes and let everybody come on in. Get your coffee, or if it's nighttime, wherever you are, get your whiskey. One of the first orders of business, as I always say, when we get started here, is that the other platforms for which there are links in the description are going to be where you're going to see the entirety of this live stream later, because as many of you know who watch this on YouTube, I clip portions of it that get uploaded afterwards, or like a portion of this particular video is going to stay up, but the full live stream is only going to be available on my other platforms. Again, this is to incentivize people to go to platforms that are not censoring people. That is the topic of our discussion, as it is many days today as well. So we're lucky to have Matt ORFALEA here today. I'm going to bring him in from the virtual green room in 1 second. I'm just going to see how we're doing. How are we doing, everybody? Okay, it looks like we're live on ROKFIN officially, and we are live on YouTube, so we should be ready to roll. Oh, and I got to mute myself over there. Okay, so let me bring in Matt. Okay, good morning.
Hey,
how are you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Matt, I appreciate it. I know it's been kind of a rough few days for you, because we're going to get into the thick of it all, but you had a few videos that were unlisted, right? You hadn't even put one up yet.
Yes.
And it was like it was audio from a Senate hearing about ivermectin, plus the Brett Weinstein podcast with Dr. Pierre Corey, who was testifying in that Senate hearing, and you'd put the audio together and some video together and had them unlisted, and YouTube was like, nah, and struck your channel. So you've been barred from uploading, right? And streaming.
Yes. And so yes, like you say, I included, they took it down for allegedly, medical misinformation. But the thing is, I had a disclaimer in front of the whole thing telling people not to take it as medical advice, but that the video is simply to document the censorship of these topics. And yeah, it wasn't public, like you said. And I had deleted, after I got one warning, I deleted all of these videos, these rough cuts. And then the next morning, like 10 hours later, overnight, then I got a strike for one of these videos that I had already deleted the night before after getting a warning. So it's just insane.
We have a lot to talk about today, and people are already kind of bringing it up in the chat. Another media defector from CBS, so is working with Project Veritas. We are definitely going to be talking about that. We're also going to be talking about Matt's rodeo, as we should call it, with mainstream media too, because you produced this viral Bernie video, which I'm going to show a little bit of in a second. And then that, that landed you a job with the Bernie campaign, and then everything just, I don't know, just imploded after that because of sort of some smear articles about you. So you have your own experience with
it's a whole other fun form of censorship that we can talk about.
Exactly. So we have a lot to talk about, and we're going to get to all of it. Why don't we were going to talk about Bernie first, but you know what? Let's just show a little bit of this video that you currently have on your channel. Should just add that the link for your channel is in the description, so people can go watch this video for itself. Also the Bernie video that you did that went viral in 2019 is on your channel as well. So that's another thing to check out. I thought it was really well done. You're really talented. So let me just play, we'll play 20 seconds or so of this. Okay. So let me know if you can't hear this.
We Americans botched the COVID crisis early on. Many people died who didn't need to.
There's actually a fix that was being talked about a year ago.
We have 100,000 patients in the hospital right now dying. I'm a lung specialist. I'm an ICU specialist. I've cared for more COVID patients than anyone can imagine. We have a solution to this crisis. There is a drug, ivermectin. It is proving to be of miraculous impact.
Ivermectin is one of the most common medicines in the world, and it won the Nobel Prize.
Ivermectin obliterates transmission of this virus. It's not my opinion. It's the data. a trial from Argentina by the lead investigator of ivermectin in Argentina.
You got 1,200 healthcare workers, high-risk people. 788 took ivermectin. The other 407 didn't. The group who didn't take it, 58% got COVID. Nobody got COVID in the 788 who took it.
8 regions of Peru initiated ivermectin distribution.
In each state, there was a rapid reduction approaching pre-pandemic levels.
Mexico, they decided to deploy ivermectin. And when they did that, you saw across Mexico this precipitous decline in deaths and hospitalizations.
And
I just realized I've been playing like 1 minute and 20 seconds of it, which is the problem with your videos because you just get sucked in.
Thanks. I hope that you don't get censored for that now.
I know.
You know, most of the video goes on to show, you know, he gets censored. They, you know, the Senate hearing that he's speaking in.
Here,
videos that got censored.
Let's show that real fast. Okay, here we go. We'll play that. Like
Congress was taken down by YouTube. Even if you were a crank testifying to Congress, why is the public not allowed to see that? And the fact that you're the opposite of a crank, testifying on a matter of importance to all of us, should have made this a very famous piece of testimony.
You're not allowed to talk about ivermectin. It's in their community guidelines. It's not allowed.
Okay, so yeah, YouTube just takes away history now. I mean, Ford Fisher, I don't know if you know Ford, but he's been on my channel.
Yeah,
okay.
I've interviewed him. He's great.
Yeah, and they just take away, he's just like documenting raw footage of whatever event he's at. And now on top of like removing stuff and giving him strikes, he now is being told he has to editorialize the content, which it's like, wait a second.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, then you're asking for exactly what you say you don't want, which is sort of opinion or, you know, unconfirmed reactions to any number of things where, you know, that sort of spins out of the community guidelines.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Doesn't make sense.
You can't put up objective truth. You know, like in the case of Ford Fisher stuff, it's like just a video camera rolling, capturing what's happening unedited. Like that is objective truth. I mean, you can argue that there are, if you want to get really like philosophical, that there are other, you know, camera angles elsewhere, you know, that's a slightly different perspective from every angle, but still, like that's pretty much as objective as you can get when it comes to video.
Yeah. Well, it's no different than what all the corporate news stations are doing. They're not, you know, they don't have 360 cams everywhere or whatever. And so, but they're allowed to
even then you can't capture everything with a 360 cam, but sorry, you know, like there's another perspective, another 360 cam perspective. Sorry.
And also, no, it's just funny too, that like Ford, for instance, you know, a lot of his video ends up getting used by mainstream corporate news, and it's like allowed to stay up if it comes from a channel that is like owned by a corporate station. But if it's Ford's original video, then it gets pulled down, which has got to make you wonder if it's really about the video itself or it's just about who's supplying the message.
Yeah. For example, another example of that. So this is Dr. Pierre Corey testifying in a Senate hearing. So videos of that were taken down. One of them had 8 million views. This is back in January of this year. But at least one of the live streams from a corporate news channel is still up on YouTube. And the title of it is Anti-Vaxxer, you know, testifies in the Senate. It's like, he's not an anti-vaxxer. Yeah. So like they're literally prefacing it with a lie. So if you preface it with a verifiable lie, somehow that's okay. That should make it less okay. That should make it not like, that's not okay. That's not cool. That's a problem. That doesn't make anything better. That makes things worse.
Yeah. Yeah. I you know, there's so much here that, I guess, let me go to my next question. Cause there's so much here that you could do literally days on this topic. And I get a pushback from people who are, you know, I don't know what you would call sort of the ideology, not just the whole, like, they're corporate, you know, private companies, they can do whatever they want, or just like, well, you're just pushing the button, you know, you're pushing the envelope. So, you know, what did you expect? You know, if you don't because I refuse to play the self-censorship game. I just, you know, I'm saying it right now, the words Alex Jones, here I am saying those 2 words, you know, God forbid you actually mention a person who actually exists. But some people say, you know, look, well, then you deserve what you get. What are your thoughts on that? Like, do you ever hear from people who say, well, you know, you should play by the rules. If you want to be nice, you play in the sandbox. You got to play by the rules.
Yeah. Mostly, yeah, no, it's a bullshit argument if you care about, you know, if you really care about the free expression and the open exchange of ideas, which is, you know, essential for any healthy democracy. And yet YouTube, who claims to be pro-democracy, Facebook claims to be pro-democracy, but this is inherently anti-democracy. When you are cutting out and banning an entire half of a conversation. So you're allowed to say ivermectin, you know, negative things about ivermectin and share negative evidence supporting your argument against ivermectin, but you're not allowed to mention studies that suggest ivermectin may be an effective prevention and treatment for COVID-19. You can't you can't even make an argument that it may be. You know, present evidence that it may be. That's what he's doing in the Senate hearing. He's presenting evidence. Now, just because there's evidence doesn't mean it's necessarily good evidence, but you should be able to share that evidence.
Yeah. Yeah, especially like you said, if the government is talking to this guy and they want to know what he's saying, and granted, okay, you had some audio in there from Brett Weinstein's podcast, which isn't necessarily the government hearing, but they're contextualizing what was going on there, and you know, that in fact also happened. So it's like that happened. A lot of people were paying attention to that. Of course, his video, you know, got removed as well. To me, it's like what this does is it creates a reality that is safe or profitable or whatever the reasons are for these companies like YouTube or the government or them together as a conglomerate. And then it frames it in a way that the public thinks that either A, like these conversations are not happening at all. So they're like totally ignorant of it, or they know there's something called hydroxychloroquine or ivermectin or whatever, but it already has this very sinister feel and nuance to it because it's like, it got censored. And there are still a lot of people who think that if YouTube pulled it off, like it must be bad for you. You know, if mom doesn't want you to eat it, then it's probably too sugary for you. It could rot your brain. And then it also like frames, I think, in a circular way, the mainstream media narratives, because I got to be honest, like a bunch of my peers really do sort of, I think, associate a positive effect of these companies censoring and suppressing speech. Like they think, I think because they think they're the gatekeepers, that now there's this digital Wild West. So you need another gatekeeper to help you out because we can't be everywhere. And so then if like YouTube's taking it down, I think in their brains, they're like, oh, okay, well, that's bad too. Because they're just not critically thinking about this stuff. And a lot of them think it's good. And so then it's not just here on the YouTube sphere where the problems then arise as a consequence of that, but it's then gets carried over into, like, say, you know, you're watching mainstream news, and it's just like all of it now is sort of aligned because they're all kind of coming from exactly the same place.
Yes, and the reason, you know, you have these people just thinking this is good is because they are under the impression, I guess they're just naive or what, that because the authority that is YouTube, who looks to the authority that is the WHO, has these stances that they are automatically correct. Now, in many cases, they are correct, but history shows they're not always correct. Just in recent history on COVID, the WHO changed their policies multiple times. And so it's absurd to just to literally delete videos that are that these authorities say are wrong. And in the case of ivermectin, they just say there's not enough evidence. Okay, so there's not enough evidence. So, like, how is it rational to not even allow people to discuss the current evidence? And there is a lot of evidence, actually. So yeah. Their main argument is they don't have like large, expensive double-blind studies, which I think would be great to have. We should have that. But how do you get that if you're not even allowed to talk about it? First, you have to, you know, the public, people need to be aware that there's a possibility here with this drug, and the evidence shows that there's a great possibility. But if you suppress that, then you're never gonna be able to graduate to, studies that are what's the word, subsidized or anyway, posted in large scientific journals.
Well, and like, I don't think, I mean, as an environmental reporter, I remember that, first off, what the government chooses to pay to study is influenced by, who has power in the government. And so if the government's not studying it, it doesn't mean that it doesn't have value. Okay. That is something we really need to make sure we're clear on about here. Like, the government chooses to study what it chooses to give money to for a variety of reasons that are not always because it's valuable for the public. And when I was covering environmental nonprofits, for instance, research groups who were trying to get grants, often they knew that if they spoke out against the government, they would lose their permits, they could lose their research funding. So that's another reason why people don't speak out about things, say, like ivermectin, for instance. If, like, Dr. Fauci has his hands on the money that you need to do your research down the road, are you going to be the one, or, the WHO influences who gets money for research grants or whatever else, because they're all going to the same cocktail parties or whatever else. Are you the person that's going to speak out about it? So there are very few voices that are brave enough to even go up against that, or to study things on their own that are not acceptable at the time. And then those voices are being removed. So I just don't think a lot of people understand that. Yeah, it may be, because I hear from people from my old industry, like, but that's just like a couple people. Okay, well, there's a reason why you're only hearing from a few people, and then that are allowed to even, like, make it through the cracks for whatever reason. But then there's also a reason why there are a lot of people who aren't joining them. And it's not just because they think they're quacks. It's because there's a lot of pressure, if you want to continue doing your work, to toe the company line. Because it's not, like, again, it's not just like the government says, oh, this would be really valuable for the general public, so we should definitely study it, even if it makes no money, because it's a drug that's been in use for a really long time and it's cheap. No, that's not, it's like, just because the government's not studying it does not mean that it's not valuable for the public. I saw that over and over again when I was an environmental reporter. And one quick other thing that I wanted to show people, this is a tweet from Cameron Kyle Seidel, who was one of the first guys to go public with, he's an MD, ER doctor in New York. And he was the first one to say that the ventilators were potentially killing people, that, like, he was seeing all these people get on ventilators and they were dying. And that was, like, very taboo at the time, because we were going to, like, turn all the car factories into ventilator factories, and we got to get more ventilators, and we're going to spend tons of money on ventilators. And this guy's like, I don't think we should be getting a lot of ventilators. And, back then, I don't even think he was talking about censorship, but now, like, he's the one, he's like, I must say, I'm stunned by the left's acceptance and even celebration of censorship, whether politics or medicine. How did private tech become arbiters of truth? And actually, it's funny, because he recently tweeted about being in support for Medicare for all, and, like, physicians wanting, money over what's best for the public. So it's like, this guy's not, he's not like some hardcore right winger or anything. He's just sitting here like, what is going on with people who are saying that this is a good thing, like removing doctors' voices as if Silicon Valley knows better than doctors like this guy.
Yeah. And this doctor in particular that was censored in the Senate hearing, he's not some crazy right winger or anti-vaxxer like they try to paint him. He's a Democrat, actually, and he is pro-vaccine. He's been fully vaccinated up until this point. He just thinks that he just made the personal decision for himself that ivermectin was safer than the vaccines, because ivermectin's been around for 40 years and it's documented to be incredibly safe. Whereas the vaccines, the long term, we don't know what happens, because there hasn't been any long-term study. And Brett Weinstein and Pierre Corey, they explained this very well in the podcast. I think you actually included that in one of your streams about it. And talking about, like, people don't even hear about this through the because it rarely makes it through the cracks. This original censorship of the story happened at the beginning of this year in January. I wasn't even aware of it until this June, when Brett Weinstein did a podcast on it. And so I think part of the reasons we mentioned how people, they're afraid to speak up. they don't speak up about it because they just, trust the authority. They're like, oh, well, obviously it's getting censored because it's harmful or dangerous.
Right.
But then the other thing is people really are afraid to even discuss it. Because you can lose your YouTube channel for this. Like I've spoken with, and I have people in my network who I really respect, who are some of the most fearless, journalists on YouTube and elsewhere, and they're afraid to cover this.
Because it will just like it
They
takes away the platform.
they could lose their fucking YouTube channel. Right
Yeah.
now, Brett Weinstein's got 2 strikes for covering this month. If he gets one more, he could lose his entire YouTube channel.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah.
It's really
Yeah, it's a real gamble. And I don't know necessarily what the solution is for the creator who's in that position, because you're right. You want to be able to still keep that storefront window open, if you will. And that's kind of the way I look at YouTube now, is it's like got a lot of passersby who I'd like to look at my storefront window, but I don't want them shopping there forever. I want them to go somewhere else. And but if you lose that altogether, you lose your ability to have really the platform with the most eyeballs on it. And then that doesn't help the message. So how do you protect the message? And, I don't know, because on one hand, it does, like I said, it doesn't feel right to self-censor. On the other hand, like they are in control. So what do you do? And yeah, I think obviously being on other platforms is a huge part of that, and doing more exclusive content over there. So YouTube's not just like getting the best of, but I don't know. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
On what exactly?
Specifically, like, I mean, obviously you're uploading stuff, but
why did I do it?
Yeah, like, well, what are your thoughts on how to play that game? Because I guess in some ways it kind of is a cat and mouse game.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. Well, in this case, I was inspired to do it because it just seems, I think, just even if I were to be punished, I think I'm in the right. I mean, this goes against censoring this information, goes against everything, that the best American value of all, like the one true thing that seemed to really separate us from much of the world. And that was our First Amendment, the freedom of expression, freedom of the press. And I just felt like I was, in this case, it's just morally right to not censor the story and to bring light to what I see is like the very dangerous censorship of this. Anyway, so that's how I made my decision. Although I was also aware that I'd had no strikes, not even a warning up until this point. And so I was disturbed when I got a warning for unpublished versions of this, and then a strike the very next morning, like I said, after I deleted any such previous version that I had, privately uploaded to YouTube.
And what do you make of the fact that they're going through your unpublished videos and deleting those and giving you strikes for that? I guess that just goes to show that if their guidelines are about spreading medical misinformation, but you never spread it because you never went public with it, that's BS.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. And let me just explain for people the reason part of my workflow is uploading rough cuts to YouTube. Well, is in the past, and even now, I think you should see YouTube will notify you if there's like copyright issues or if you're going to get demonetized for any number of reasons. They'll notify you, just after it's uploaded, regardless of whether you made it public or not. In fact, they actually recommend you first publish unlisted and wait to see, how it responds before you go public with it. And so that's been my workflow. And this is the first time I've been punished. Never had a problem. They'll just tell you there's an issue and you can fix it if you want. But this time it was just straight to punishment, which is extremely disturbing. It's more of a thought crime because, like you said, like it didn't even publish. I just considered going public with it, but you're punished for that anyway. That's really scary. That's a whole other level of censorship.
Right. Okay, before we get to your viral Bernie video, why did you decide, because obviously you could cover any number of topics. Why did you decide to go after ivermectin?
Well, I just thought the story, I was disturbed by the fact that well, first, come on. It's the biggest issue in the world today is the COVID virus. And the fact that discussion of possible treatment and prevention of the virus, the fact that that was censored in our own U.S. Senate was just such an insane story that people are not aware of. Like I said, I wasn't even aware of it until recently. And I just felt that that was a story that people should be aware of. And that was enough for me to, so it should be covered. So, and I wanted more people to learn about it. Not advocating for ivermectin, but just informing people that this discussion got censored on an incredibly large scale.
Yeah. What do you make of the fact that this isn't a bigger conversation among mainstream journalists? Exactly like what you just brought up, that a hearing on potential treatments was suppressed by YouTube, and the control that these companies have. You're an independent filmmaker, and again, we're going to talk about what happened with you in the mainstream world, but I'm just curious, like, what are your thoughts on why it doesn't seem to be more of a concern? Is it because like they're the corporate oligarchs too, and so they're just not worried their voices will be censored, and so they just don't care, and basically everything they do is self-serving? So why would they care about somebody like you, or me, or Dr. Pierre Corey or whatever? Because at least they'll still be there when the dust settles. I'm just curious your thoughts on that.
Well, I think it's a number of things. And two of them we've already discussed, just an appeal to authority. One, their fear of getting, criticized for, challenging authority also. And you've mentioned in your videos before, just the economics of it. Like, it takes time and money and effort to dig a little deeper to see that this is a legitimate discussion to be had about ivermectin. There is evidence to suggest it. But that takes time to really look through this. Whereas what we've seen is, for example, in one AP fact check, that said Corey was false. Dr. Corey in that hearing was false because he claimed that ivermectin was a, quote, miracle drug. Well, if you look in that, first of all, like, it's absurd to fact check that something is not a miracle. Obviously, a drug is not literally a miracle. So that's an absurd premise for the fact check to begin with. But in the article, they don't present any of the evidence that Dr. Corey mentioned. They don't address any of the evidence Dr. Corey mentioned, and they don't debunk any of the evidence that Dr. Corey mentioned. They just refer to the WHO's policy, saying that there's no good evidence. And oddly, really weirdly, most of the article, or at least a significant portion of the article, they're not even talking about ivermectin. They're talking about hydroxychloroquine. And so they're talking about how bad, how that's been disproven. Why are you spending? That's absurd. And why are they doing that in an article that's supposed to be debunking ivermectin? Well, it's because, again, I think it's just the laziness or time thing. It's like, well, that's already been reported on. So fuck, it'll take time for me to actually research ivermectin, but we already know that
Right.
hydroxychloroquine supposedly doesn't work. So I'll just put that in here. So who cares if the article's not about hydroxychloroquine? This is evidence enough that ivermectin doesn't work, because the WHO said another medicine didn't work also. I mean, it's just.
Yeah, they just draw parallels to associate with because they have these, whether they realize it or not, they have these ideological purity standards when it comes to people that they will allow you to associate with, people who they consider acceptable to speak. They are constantly sort of grooming that environment. Like, well, this person's not allowed to talk for this reason, or this person we shouldn't associate for that reason. And I do blame that for a lot of just the societal tribalism now. Like, well, I don't like my grandma because I saw on mainstream news that people that think like that are this kind of person, and that's constantly being done. So I think they do it too with the drugs or anything else. It's like, well, if I can just link this to something else that has a negative reputation, then just by virtue of linking the two of them or putting them in the same article, then I've sowed a seed of doubt in the reader just by putting that in there. And I think that's part of it.
Yeah. And that's what you do when you don't have a real argument. You attack somebody with ad hominem attacks or appeal to tribalism. And we're seeing a lot of that.